sold everything, and there I was, not knowing what to do or where to go. For about a year or so, I was really not able to work. I started spending a lot of time alone and spending a lot of time in the desert, wandering around a little bit, sort of trying to think about what I do.
We really are constantly pushing towards this thing of the presence of something. I could argue that the only real moment is that first moment of actually being there, running your hands intimately over a situation, and being in the presence of something that really has impact on you. Every step from there is by degrees an abstraction. The idea of photography is a classic example in which we think the photograph can actually somehow emulate or record the moment. It does, but only in the terms of images. But it has none of the, in a sense, subsidiary information, which is the quality of the light, the feeling of this rock on my ass right now, no sense of the way the breeze is blowing across me, the sound in the sense of its relationship to the space in the distance, close behind me, far in front of me. All those things overlap and coalesce and make a moment. The desert was a great place to, in a sense, encounter that phenomena as pure phenomena. It doesn't have those kinds of things that we normally identify and say, well, there's those beautiful trees there and look at this thing there. There are events in the desert, but actually the desert's at its best because it's sort of stripped of all those kinds of rhymes and reasons and has only its presence. And there are moments when the desert, it's really in its beauty, it just stands up and hums. And when it hums like that, you're in the presence of it. And then all of a sudden it'll be gone.
Where I crossed over and recognized the world of phenomena was when I really became aware that the shadow was as real as the center of the painting. The shadow has actually no physicality. You can't weigh it, you can't measure it. It's completely transient. And so in one level, on a quantitative level, it actually has no existence. And yet on another level, it is absolutely critical. You cannot see without these shadows. The world of phenomena is that which is in constant transit. These are not lies. These are a part of the textural richness of the world. And in terms of our perception, it is filled with these qualities which really enrich our lives. These were the thoughts, these were the questions I was thinking about, sort of riding around in the desert alone. And this idea of moving towards phenomena made perfect sense to me, so I really tried to deal with that. One of the key things that I touched upon was operating in response. My invitations at the beginning were from galleries or museums, and what I would do is I would come to the site in response to this invitation, and I would take the site as given, whatever they offered me, whatever set of circumstances. So I began essentially with the space and tried to let the space reveal itself to me in a way which informed all the decisions I would make. Most of these spaces were pristine white boxes. And in responding to those, the works were very, very subtle. What you try to do is set up a situation in which you can have that, what scientists call the aha experience, where you walk in and say, oh my God, this is, and you have that moment in which something really happens, which are the most memorable moments in our lives. And those are best known when they're unstructured. So I would try and leave as few traces of myself as possible and set up the circumstances with the idea that this may take place. I was interested in that whole experience of being in there, not being in there to look at something, but rather being in there, period. The first invitation I got to actually do one was at the Museum of Modern Art. Two friends of mine came when I was working, and I could tell that they were having great difficulty because they were sort of standing on one foot and then on the other, saying, "Yes, it's kind of interesting in that." And there's that kind of strange moment where you don't know, how people are going to deal with it. And there was a small little screen across the entrance to the door. The museum was open in the evening that evening, and a black kid came through there, about 15 years old. And he got in the room, and I could tell by his body language that he really was getting it. He was really moving around. And I realized that the difficulty was just the question of, is it art? My friends who were having to struggle with this transition from that old idea of art encased in objects and in painting to this phenomenal life, that was very difficult. But to just simply allow yourself to do it was not difficult. I'm not trying to tell people what to do or how to see or what's right or what's wrong. I'm trying to set up a situation in which they really perceive themselves perceiving and realize they're the magic. I began to slowly understand more and more that the real art is the experience, the viewer actually looking at what the artist has given them as an extended way of looking at the world. It's about seeing, it's about being aware. It's something that once you gain it, you carry it with you all the time, and you live in an enriched world. The beauty of all this is that it's totally free. It is something that you have every moment of your life. When you walk through the world, you can see things, and I see things that are more interesting and more beautiful than anything I've ever made. The initial mock-up in the garage in San Diego led to a lot of other ideas and possibilities. What we're doing is we're masking off a rectangular shape at the center of each grim, and then we're going to paint each one black. I think that'll give the piece more weight and more spatial character. But you actually don't know where this thing is going until it's basically done. Actually, there's still a possibility that it won't work at all. You know, when you're trying to grab something ephemeral, sometimes you just don't get a hold of it. I mean, and when you don't, then there's nothing. It's not like if you have an object that already is and it has some dimensions and some interest. This either has it or it doesn't have it. And so you just have to say, I can't do it. You ought to see what museum people do when you tell them you've got no show.
The art doesn't reside in the object. The art in the object or the art in a set of circumstances is, in a sense, the opportunity for you to have this moment of awareness, this moment of really, in a sense, touching something special that human beings can touch. So that what you walk out of the room with somehow is what's of value.
If I say to you, you can make something, and it is going to be so beautiful, it's going to be the best thing you've ever done. Only one problem, it's only going to last for 20 minutes. And you have to make a decision. And it really is a reflection of your values, where you're placing the value, what you place the value on. If the value is the experience, then it doesn't die in that sense. It essentially is incarnate in you. You essentially now act on and are a result or a kind of collection of all those experiences. And so the idea of something being ephemeral or that you can own it or not own it, it doesn't make any difference. Actually, if you take the position that in fact we do perceive and that we are the important thing, then nothing is lost.
What I'd wanted to do all along was to actually bring in the richness of the outside. And finally, by the 1980s, the idea of working in response began to generate more eccentric kinds of invitations. And these were for sites and situations that were more and more public in their character. Atriums, urban plazas, airports, and so on. The whole issue really was about context. It was not about objects at all. It was about how we perceived objects in context. The object may be there, but you don't see it separate from or outside of the context it's in. That was probably the biggest, most dramatic shift I made, even more than stopping being a painter. And in a funny way, I was at the point zero where there was nothing, nothing left or no place to go and no thing and such. And suddenly I was like on a precipice with everything possible. There was no tool I couldn't use, no medium I couldn't use, no technique that was not legitimate in context. These are very, very different contexts. Each calls for an entirely different kind of response. When I talk about public art, I really always use the phrase art in public places. That is, that there is a motivation that comes out of the history of art in which we're trying to, as it were, exercise certain ideas in the world. And on the basis of that, I'll look at their space and then in time develop a project which is in line with all the things that I need to do and want to do. They're about like that on the back. The hip might be just a little higher. I bring this idea to them. Now, they may have doubts and they may have reservations. They're not concerned with any of the issues that have motivated me to even come to this activity. We have to build up the mound, we have to grade it, we have to, in a sense, fine grade it. Because I'm not just doing a piece, but to do a piece in line with this new aesthetic, with this new philosophy. We have to put the rocks in.
Now, I'm assuming that if the project I'm doing, that if it makes real sense, makes sense in the space, even though it comes from my motivation, that it should possibly make sense in terms of their motivation.
I mean, I love what you're doing in the second inner circle, but I'm uncomfortable with that particular mass being there as a part of it because I
You
think
are
it's
in a situation which is riddled with contradictions, because what I'm doing right now is testing these ideas in the world. You have to understand that the world is not interested in that. They're going along just fine and dandy with the ideas that they've got.
The three different prices I got were the most expensive is $431, path being the real critical element, the cheapest being $235.
I think we're at a moment for clarifying what the role of the artist really is in here. I mean, this whole process that I'm involved in is probably not going to even get sorted out in my lifetime.
First element that I think could be repeated continuous, this idea that at certain moments.
It's amazing how many of these projects fall apart for reasons that nobody can predict. Chicago didn't get built because a large insurance company went broke right in the middle of it. New Orleans didn't get built because the mayor realized that it was a political hot potato. He could probably lose his job over it. Falling Water didn't get built because the man whose project it was died. Ohio State didn't get built because it was actually at no point higher than 18 inches. But by the time it had got translated through the school paper, everyone had this idea that it was building this giant monster that would block out the sun. So the reasons are just ad infinitum.